It's a fall from grace as brutal as it is sudden. Carlos Ghosn, the all-powerful boss of Renault Nissan Mitsubishi, arrested as he got off his private jet in Tokyo on suspicion of tax fraud. The boss of the world's biggest auto alliance due to be out of a job before the end of the week, leaving a sometimes uneasy partnership hanging in the balance. Ghosn had forged for himself a unique role as the invaluable conduit between the French and the Japanese ever since he came to the rescue of Nissan nearly 2 decades ago when the Japanese maker was ailing. Now, the Japanese, owners of the UK's biggest car factory, by the way, at Sunderland, seems to have the stronger hand in what promises to be a battle royale to save that alliance. Already in presenting his excuses, the chief executive there vowing never again to let one single man wield so much power. Some here in French business circles wonder aloud if it's a bit of a boardroom coup that's brought about Ghosn's exposure to tax-dodging charges, while France's labor unions ask about the charges at hand. Remind everyone of a salary estimated at 12 million euros last year for the man who made a reputation as le cost killer. Ghosn, who back in 2016 faced a shareholders' revolt over his pay package, is it a tragedy that's squarely of Carlos Ghosn's own making? If so, how should the French state, which owns a crucial 15% stake in Renault, react to the billions that have been wiped out on the stock market by Ghosn's alleged greed? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the fall of Carlos Ghosn. Joining us, Bill Dean, former correspondent for Ward's Automotive. How are you?
That's fine.
Thanks for being with us. Thanks as well to Franck Agéry, professor of management at the prestigious Mines Paris Engineering School, which counts among its alumnus.
Yeah, exactly.
Carlos Ghosn
himself.
Right. Douglas Bolduc joins us from Munich. You're the managing editor for Automotive News Europe. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And France 24's Yuka Royer is with us as well. Nice to see you, Yuka. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Now, under Japanese law, Carlos Ghosn's detention could last up to 23 days, an arrest that literally came out of the blue for the 64-year-old Brazilian-born, Lebanese-rooted, French-educated boss of Renault Nissan Mitsubishi. France's highest-paid CEO is also Japan's highest-paid CEO, and he's accused of hiding a portion of his Japanese earnings. A monumental fall from grace for a one-time corporate hero. Bill Dean, it's fair to say everyone was shocked.
Everyone was surprised. Shocked, I don't know. Some people are happy.
Some people are happy. What was your feeling when you heard the news, Douglas Bolduc?
Oh, I have to say I was also shocked. This has been a monumental year for the automotive industry, with one CEO being put in jail, another one now being arrested, and another one passing very soon after leaving office. This has been we're just blazing new territory.
But blazing new territory. Some have even talked about the curse of being number one, since in 2017. Renault Nissan became the world's number one car maker in terms of vehicles made. There was a big scandal at Toyota when they were number one, a big scandal, as you know, at Volkswagen. Is there a curse when you're number one?
Well, it certainly seems to be a problem, because all of the companies that have risen to that height have had monumentally bad luck afterwards. In this case, at least you're dealing with Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi, potentially just one person as the cause, rather than it being a diesel scandal like at Volkswagen, or a safety scandal like we saw at Toyota. So of the three companies, Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi seems to be in the best position to avoid having long-term repercussions from this.
All right. And as you say, just one person, Carlos Ghosn, whose saving of Nissan earned him his own manga cartoon book. Yuka Royer. And it's interesting. We're going to listen now to part of the drama that unfolded on Monday was this incredible press conference. The current chief executive, Hiroto Saikawa, who was a protege of Ghosn, but you wouldn't have guessed it, the way he turned on the boss during that late-night presser in Tokyo.
I must say that we are talking about the dark side of the Ghosn era, which has lasted for many years. It is problematic that the head of Renault, which owns 43% of Nissan's shares, also led the Nissan group. Too much authority had been given to a single person.
How are the Japanese reacting to the news?
Well, it was surprising to see. First of all, that press conference lasted an hour and a half, and much of that time, Hiroto Saikawa devoted to telling people about the wrongdoings that the company discovered through the years of Carlos Ghosn. It's also quite a stark difference to usual corporate press conferences following a scandal that we see in Japan, where corporate executives of the company line up, bow their heads low. He didn't even once bow down. This Mr. Hiroto Saikawa, in a way, apologized, but he also presented it in such a way that Nissan, he made it clear that Nissan was the victim here as well. He admitted that Nissan had been cooperating with investigators. It was a whistleblower's report that sparked an internal investigation.
A whistleblower's report that sparks an internal investigation, and there's two schools of thought. Is it the whistleblower that was...
Who was the whistleblower?
Who was the whistleblower?
Who was the whistleblower? He didn't say. He specifically said that he couldn't tell. He couldn't give more details about the internal investigation itself. He at the same time that he said that this had been going on for years. And looking at media reports that came out after that press conference, I noticed that there were several that said that, well, this was nothing new. Rumors had been circulating inside Nissan that Carlos Ghosn was a greedy figure. That there were rumors that he was using. He had for some people, it wasn't surprising that he had been spending company assets for private use. The question is, though, why now? Then why come out with these findings?
Why now? Why come out with this findings? All right, so two questions on that point. Bill Deem, some saying that, the whistleblower might be Saikawa himself in a bid to distance himself, either to cooperate with Japanese authorities and quickly distance himself from Carlos Ghosn when they realized that there could be a problem, or simply as part of a boardroom coup.
I don't think Saikawa, I have no reason to think that he was a whistleblower on this. I would imagine more that it's somebody who is making a deal with people so that he doesn't get in trouble. He was probably part of the cover-up for years, the whistleblower. And he's now going to be able to skate because he turned in the big boss. You know, that's the kind of thing that happens.
And you were saying that the lavish lifestyle of Carlos Ghosn, was it all...
That is another aspect that's been catching a lot of attention.
That's been all over the papers in Japan.
It has been all over the papers. His wedding that... For his second marriage that he organized at the Versailles, at Petit Trianon, at the Versailles Palace.
Paid for by Nissan.
Allegedly, but it's not part. It doesn't come up in Nissan's paper. Given that we don't know all the details about what Nissan gave to authorities about the alleged financial misconduct, and whether that wedding or his divorce fees were part of that, it's still unclear. We have to be careful about this. But as I said, rumors within the company have been circulating that his lavish lifestyle was in part helped by Nissan money. At the same time, though, there were also questions raised as to why he would hide his income, why he would underreport his income, given the fact that salaries are taxed at the source in Japan. So there was no real benefit for Carlos Ghosn himself by hiding his his income.
When you make 12 million a year, why hide any of your income, Franck Algérie?
I have no idea, but I would like to say it's not, the surprise is the scandal comes from Japan, because he was supposed to be an half-god in Japan. But in France, there is a long list of wrongdoings, and people were angry about Carlos Ghosn. There were a vague of suicide employees in the last years. There was a so-called, espionage case. I don't know if you remember, in 2011, where people were supposed to have sold industrial secrets to China. In fact, it was not the case.
And then there was 2016, where there was an open revolt by shareholders over
Exactly.
his pay package.
Yeah, it was the first time in France that the general meeting assembly of shareholders voted against the compensation proposed by the board of directors. But the fact is, Carlos Ghosn was both CEO and chairman. So there is a problem of corporate governance.
Which is frequent in France.
Very. 80% of the 40 largest companies in France, they combine, they cumulate the two functions.
So what happens? A boss who's, as you say, seen as a demigod, it goes to his head after a while because he's got all this power?
Yeah, I think he lost the. He is very far from the preoccupation of average people.
Bill Deem, you covered extensively Renault as part of your beat over decades. What was your feeling on Carlos Ghosn? This guy, he's poached from the Michelin Tire Company, where there too he was known as a ruthless chap, and he gets the nickname Le Cost Killer. But what was he like?
He was a good manager who managed by fear, by direction, by dictatorial approach toward the employees. But he taught a lot of people at Renault how to do a better job. Renault's making money today. Renault trained Carlos Tavares, who's now running PSA, who came into Peugeot with Peugeot was in trouble. Peugeot bought Opel for unknown reasons, and he's turned that around. He turned in great profits second quarter this year. Patrick Pallotta was the CEO or COO before Tavares. Patrick Pallotta was caught up in that scandal with the Patrick Pallotta was the bouc émissaire, the scapegoat for the spy deal, which was, to me, that was where Ghosn should have slipped and fallen, because Ghosn came on television here in France and said, we have proof that these people did this, and they didn't have proof because they hadn't done it. 3 people were fired, and it was a horrible time for those 3 people who were good employees of Renault.
Douglas Bullock, I'm interested to know, what was the street rep before Monday of Carlos Ghosn, where you are?
Well, all of our dealings with Carlos Ghosn had always been extremely professional. He's an amazing executive, and I've never seen anybody who's been able and so well versed in every single market. You could ask him questions about just about any topic affecting the industry, and he had an answer, and not just a silly answer, a very direct and good answer. The feeling is that he has done incredible things during his 20 years, sort of building the alliance with his association with Nissan first, and then coming into Renault, and then adding on Mitsubishi. It's been an amazing run. An amazing run of success with all 3 of those companies bringing profits to their shareholders. And it was interesting. We just spoke to Carlos Ghosn last month, obviously prior to this. And one of the things that he had told us is, because we were talking to him more so about NAFTA, and he ended his quote by saying, "The essence of our job is adapting to change, and change can come from anywhere." And boy, did it come from anywhere for him this week.
Yeah, it did indeed. Franck Agéry, let me ask you, because yes, he does make 12 million euros a year, but the guy would travel. What an incredible workhorse. Traveling every month. 1 week he'd be in Japan, 1 week he'd be in France, 1 week he'd be, I don't know where, visiting some plant at the four corners of the earth. When you look at the schedule and the role that Carlos Ghosn had, what's your reaction in terms of what he's paid and CEO pay?
I mean, I think the amount of compensation is it's too much, and I think it's a problem for everybody in the world. I mean, if you take a big fund like BlackRock or the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, they are big shareholders, and they say CEOs are the compensations are too high. We need to introduce rules. The gap between the CEO compensation and the wages of employees was 1 to 20 in the US in the 60s. Now, on average, it's 1 to 300.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So, it cannot be explained, There is a classical explanation, for instance, the CEO from PSA, Carlos Tavares, was auditioned by the Senate in France. And he said, we are like sports stars, we deserve to be well paid because we are stars, we are very exceptional. And I think it's a mistake, because they are not like Messi or Ronaldo. They do not score 60 goals per year. I mean, they can be coach. They are coach. And a coach his job is to organize a collective action. So there is no argumentation, no argument for.
There's no argument for that.
No.
When we come back, we're going to take a look at how factory workers are dealing with it all. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the rise and the spectacular fall of Carlos Ghosn, the chair of the world's #1 auto alliance, Renault Nissan Mitsubishi. With us to talk about it is Bill Dean, former correspondent for Ward's Automotive, Franck Agéry, professor of management at the prestigious Mines Paris Engineering School, which Ghosn attended when he was young. Douglas Bolduc of Automotive News Europe is with us from Munich, as is Yuka Royer, are from France 24. We were mentioning the divide over Carlos Ghosn. It's interesting to read the press here in France. For conservative pro-business dailies, there's a whiff of betrayal on the part of Nissan, they say. For the left, it's about a fat cat boss lining his own pockets. As for the Financial Times, in its lead editorial, it describes how Icarus-like he may have flown his corporate jet too close to the sun. The FT saying Mr. Ghosn's trajectory resembles that of many high-flying business leaders for whom hubris is a constant threat. His descent indicates the flight path of the jet-setting, globe-trotting corporate leader has peaked as barriers to world trade go up and popular tolerance of their pay, perks, and lifestyle declines. You agree with that statement, that the tolerance is declining after that shareholder revolt we saw, Franck Agéry, 2 years ago?
Yes, I think so. For instance, CNBC makes annually a survey they call Corporate Global Survey. They interview people, employees, students, managers, what they think about big corporation. And the results are astonishing, except China, who is really pro-business. In all countries, there is a mistrust toward big companies, and especially top executives. When the question, what are the motivations of top executives, the answer is compensations, money. Okay, so I think it's a mistrust, a general mistrust in the US, in Europe, everywhere.
A mistrust, and the mistrust felt at the ground level here in France as partner station France 2 went to the largest factory that makes Renault and Nissan cars in the Paris area at Flins.
Anxious employees outside their factory before their shift. A day after Carlos Ghosn was arrested, Renault is shaken and workers fear for their jobs.
If there's no work, how are we to feed our families?
He's a manager, they can go at any moment, but the image of a brand is going to suffer.
As the investigation into financial misconduct continues, a lot of them feel angry.
We're here working 8 hours per day, and we declare everything we make. He has to pay, and that's it.
For this union member, the scandal is all the harder to accept after the company's relentless efforts to cut costs.
I'm shocked but not surprised, because he earned 45,000 euros per day, and that's not enough for him. Salaries for employees have been stagnant for a decade. There's a huge gulf between us and these people, and their reality.
But in Japan, employees at Nissan are still grateful for what they think Ghosn did for them.
His arrest is a shame, because he's the one who helped Nissan pick itself up again.
Carlos Ghosn remains in police custody in Japan, but French authorities have underlined that there is no proof of wrongdoing in France.
No proof of the wrongdoing in France. Yuka, your reaction to what we heard from those Japanese car makers in that report?
Well, we had one saying that he was the savior. That was how he has been seen. To be fair, he was seen as a charismatic leader, somebody that Japan hadn't seen before. He was parachuted in from Renault in 1999, first as chief operating officer, and then took over as CEO. His management style, though, was so different, so foreign to Japanese corporate culture. Also, we've been talking about his executive pay. Japanese corporate executives aren't paid that much compared to other countries. And Carlos Ghosn, he faced a shareholder revolt here in France in 2016 at Renault, but at Nissan as well, a couple of years earlier, he also faced questions about his pay. And he defended his salary, saying, well, that's part of the reason why Japan has difficulty inviting able foreign executives to come into the country to work, because it's not an attractive place to work in. But it also, there's speculation that it also might have been the reason why he underreported his income, because it just fared so badly with Japanese corporate culture.
Right. It didn't mesh with the local culture, and that's another part of the problem, isn't it, Bill?
Well, and this might go back to where the time he started hiding money. He didn't tell the Conseil d'Administration of Renault how much money he was making at Nissan until about 2010. Japan made new rules saying that compensation had to be announced. And then the Renault executives learned that he was making $8 million a year there, when his salary here was 1.2 million. And so suddenly rules changed in Japan. That's about the time that we're talking about when he was trying to hide some of the compensation he got in Japan. That would cover, like 8 years worth of fooling around.
So the boss of Peugeot Citroën justifies his big pay because he says I'm like a football star,
rock star,
or rock star, whatever. In the case of Carlos Ghosn, he's got this unique alliance between two car makers. One is in France, the other is in Japan. The corporate headquarters, I think, are in the Netherlands, and so he's sort of the sole conduit between all of this. You know that the old saying by General de Gaulle that cemeteries are full of unreplaceable people. In this case, though, did Carlos Ghosn build a structure where he was the only guy who could run it?
He did, and that saved him during the time of the false accusations against the three people. It saved him because the Renault administration knew that only because we had Nissan and the money coming from Nissan, Renault gets 43% of the Nissan profits. So France wanted to keep that. So France didn't get mad at Carlos Ghosn in spite of the fact that he had done a bad thing. Didn't get angry with him because he was keeping the alliance together. And that's been his power.
All right, and before I turn to Douglas Bogle to find out what happens next, I just want to ask you, Yuka, one of the British papers quoting a senior French executive at Renault, saying the former executive, saying the problem is the French and the Japanese, they don't trust each other, he said. It's got to be difficult. It's got to be so different, right?
It has to be, it must be difficult. Trust is something that is not easily acquired. But I mean, he did have 20 years. He did spend, Carlos Ghosn did spend 20 years trying to consolidate this alliance and make it stronger. And I think that mistrust began to emerge as Renault and Carlos Ghosn tried to have more say in Nissan's dealings. I mean, Nissan was happy to have a savior who invested in the company, helped turn around a company and save it from bankruptcy. But that was back in 1999. And now Nissan is the more profitable of the two companies. So it may be that Nissan started to feel that Renault was the burden.
And there's a shareholder we haven't talked about yet, and it's sort of the 900-pound gorilla in the room, which is the French state. Yeah. Owns 15%, 1.5 of Renault, which if you don't follow business much, that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is, right, Franck Agéry?
Yeah.
So as a result, that gives them this veto power. It's a former nationalized, state-run company, Renault, and as a result, there's a lot of eyebrow raising when it comes to the French state having such an important say in companies like Air France and Renault.
Yes, but they do not exercise their power so much because they wanted to preserve the alliance and the success of the alliance. That's why they did not really fight against Carlos Ghosn during the different crises. I think and I don't know if you heard probably the statements of the Bruno Le Maire, the Ministry of Economy. He said Carlos Ghosn has to go because now he is a danger for the alliance.
And we heard that.
So the change have turned dramatically, and the surprise comes from Japan, because in France there were lots of criticisms, even from the MEDEF, which is a business union, the
French Business Elite Association.
Yeah, because Carlos Ghosn did not play the rules. For instance, there are codes of conduct. You are supposed to behave properly, to have good manners, and he did not have good manners. No. For example, with shareholders, he said, I am the chairman of the board of directors. I can have the pay I've decided,
So Douglas Bogle took several points. First of all, we have heard, as Franck Agéry was saying, the French finance minister, but also the Japanese one, both of them saying we have to preserve the alliance. Do they mean it? And B, is that going to be easy or hard to do?
Well, what's interesting, and whether you want to believe it, over the last year, there have been a number of reports, unsubstantiated, that there was going to be a merger. And then as this started to heat up, because, Ghosn really and truly, like Bill had mentioned a little while ago, after the Pallotta situation and the changes that we've seen at the Renault-Nissan relationship, is that Ghosn was sort of downgrading himself. He was moving into more of ceremonial roles. He wasn't doing the day-to-day business. And so he was moving away from a lot of that. you were right that, I mean, again, he's the straw that stirs the drink. There's no one else has the same level of power to bind these three companies together like him. And so he should be paid basically whatever he wants, if you ask me. We're forgetting the 20 years that the guy has put into this, undyingly just promoting these brands nonstop, 24/7. It's like this all gets tossed out the window because now he's a greedy jerk. I mean, again, the alliance will continue because this is one guy, okay, who is crucial to the alliance. But if these partners are actually genuine in wanting to continue this, there's no reason why it doesn't continue because he moves out. What we'll see over time is whether that's just a lot of lip flapping and that both companies want to go their separate ways, particularly the Japanese, and say, hey, we're the strong ones. We're shoveling money into this Renault company. Why do we need them? We're strong. Let's go out on our own. And as I forget which of the panelists alluded to, this move towards nationalism, maybe it's like, hey, we don't need this French partner anymore.
Franck Agéry?
Well, I'm not sure because the alliance is quite strong at the moment because the level of integration is very strong for purchasing, for example, in design issues, for production. So they made very big efforts to integrate, and that's one of the success of Carlos Ghosn. One of the problems he had is, for example, for the Renault brand, it is a profitable brand, but the success came from strategic decision made by his predecessor, Louis Schweitzer. I mean, the alliance with Nissan was the decision of Louis Schweitzer, and Carlos Ghosn was sent to Japan to reduce the cost, to kill the cost. But also, Louis Schweitzer had made a very important choice by developing Dacia, so low-cost strategy.
Let's just remind people, it was 1996, 1997 when they realized that if you want to survive as a car maker, you got to be bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And they invested very much in low-cost strategy. And a low-cost strategy is very profitable. That's a surprise, but Dacia is the most profitable brand of the group. And that choice is made by his predecessor.
Bill Deem, you agree that the alliance, there's no other way but to keep it?
I think it will be kept. I think there's even a possibility that one of the other Renault guys who worked at Nissan in 1999 could come back to the picture here. Patrick Pallotta is back in France. He left Renault in 2012 after the spy crisis, but he was the number 2 French guy in Japan in the days of putting the alliance together. So there's a guy who he's back now in France. Macron just named him to a project to look at the future of the automobile in France and in Europe. So he's around. That's a possibility to put a person in the place that could bind the alliance together. If it breaks up, I mean, Mitsubishi is owned by Nissan, so Nissan-Mitsubishi will always be an alliance. But as Frank said, there's a lot going on where they're working together. That factory in Flens, they make the Nissan Micra, the Renault Clio, and the Renault Zoe, the electric car. In Maubeuge,
in the north of France, yeah.
In the north of France, they will be making Mitsubishis. They make Daimlers. They make Daimler's little thing that's like a Kangoo, the French Kangoo. Daimler Chrysler is in this alliance also, owning parts of Renault, parts of Nissan, and Renault Nissan owns parts of them. So
there's no reason to untangle it. Douglas Bolduc, let me ask you, if you're watching this show from Sunderland in the north of England, home to the UK's largest car factory, the Nissan plant, should you be more worried about the sudden fall of Carlos Ghosn or Brexit?
Oh, Brexit by far. I mean, again, like we mentioned, Carlos Ghosn will be more than likely replaced. The alliance will continue because everybody who follows this industry knows that you need these alliances because there's way too much money that needs to be spent into electrifying the powertrains, to making the autonomous and making them connected. Those three things are just such massive drains on the finances that alliances are really the only way to keep surviving. So if you're in Sunderland, you're sort of nodding your head saying, okay, Carlos, you made some mistakes, and but Brexit is a much bigger concern for those guys.
Much bigger concern for those guys. What will be the takeaway from all of this, Yuka Royer, in terms of, we've talked about the corporate greed aspect, but also the fact that we're saying the alliance is going to continue. Again, the corporate culture in Japan and the corporate culture in France is so different. Now, a lot of people think, well, maybe the Nissan people and the Renault people don't really mingle at all, but
each other. I think one interesting aspect of it is that there's another figure in this bizarre story that's rarely talked about. That's Greg Kelly, who was Carlos Ghosn's right-hand man, who was arrested alongside him.
My bad, we did not mention him. It's true.
He is a member of the 9-member Nissan board. And there are 5 Japanese members, including those close to Carlos Ghosn, and those closer to Hiroto Saikawa. So we'll see how the board will be reshuffled and how Saikawa will bring the company together after this. Corporate culture, though, I think that in the 20 years that with Carlos Ghosn at the helm, I think corporate culture must have changed. To an extent, to at least welcome some ideas and corporate and ways to govern the company as well. So I think that it's not a clash of civilizations as such anymore. It might have been back in the 90s, but it's looking at a future with the alliance intact, but without Carlos Ghosn.
A smaller world. Just very briefly, Franck Agiri, will there be other Carlos Ghosns, or will this be a cautionary tale? The man who earned too much.
I think it's a unique case in to the extent that it's really a big shock, as you said, and there are lots of crises. He has a very peculiar trajectory. He is Brazilian, Lebanon, French. He has different nationalities. A global manager, a kind of global manager. But I think there are lots of excesses of power among top executives in big companies, and I think it's a big concern because they, in a certain way, they play against their team, and I think it's a problem because corporations are collective achievements. They should be seen as such. And I think Renault and Nissan have great competencies, and they will survive and develop after his departure.
Franck Agiri, I want to thank you. I want to thank Bill Dean. I want to thank Douglas Bolduc for joining us from Munich. Yuka Royer, stay with us. Media Watch is next.